inspect the summary video. We're here in Euclid in Cleveland, Ohio, and we have this fire escape, pretty big monster here. And what we have to do is, we're doing the examination in preparation for this thing to be load tested. Fire escapes must be structurally sound, must be kept painted in order to proceed to a load test or to a certification. At this time, the fire escape has not been kept painted, and it is older than 78, so we do have the EPA lead law that must be applied to this. So you must be a licensed renovator to scrape and paint this fire escape. That's one requirement. Number two is structurally sound. Fire escape is not. We've got a lot of rust jacking throughout. Got a lot of welded connections that I'll be talking about. And again, you have two options. You can spot repair this fire escape and then load test it at 100 pounds per square foot. So that platform down there will probably take about 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. This platform here will probably take 4,000 to 5,000 pounds. These staircases will be load tested with 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. Or at this time, you can refurbish the entire structure and avoid the load test for the next 15 to 25 years. You still need to examine it every 5, but the load test can be put off because you can provide other evidence of strength, and that is the fact that you've refurbished this fire escape at this time. There's a lot of welds, there's a lot of band-aid repairs that included welds, but we got a lot of rust and a lot of material. So let's start. I'm going to do an inspection from up here, talk about all these connections, and then I'll do a second half video from down there down to the ground. Okay, so platform. We got a lot of superstructure here. I-beams. It's still in good order, but a lot of it is a welded connection and a bolted connection. We can't load test anything that's a welded connection, but as soon as you put a couple of bolts in that connection, we can then negate that as a need for a load test in that specific area, because the bolts can be swapped out and the welded connection can be rebolted, and we avoid having to x-ray or load test the weld. We will not load test anything that has a weld. We want to put a bolt through it. We want to seal all these joints here to make sure that no water gets into those, because that's what's causing some rust jacking and some ice jacking down below. So we'll show you what that looks like. Anything that's against the building, you got to seal it. If you don't seal it, what's going to happen, water gets in there and it eats the rust, eats the bolts, like that lag screw. You can see all the lag screw is rusted. Okay, change the bolts. Put some bolts here. No load test needed. Otherwise, I can verify that these connections are going to be in good order, but now I need to load test it as a confirmation. Okay, so as you can see, that's a perfect example of what happens when you let rust get into the welded connections. That's why we don't load test welded connections, is because if not properly maintained over time, they become suspect. But as soon as we clean that, seal that, and bolt it, we don't have to worry about it. So changing those bolts and bolting the welded connection eliminates the load test. So going down, every single one of these treads and every single one of these deck plates is rusted underneath. So these need to be popped, cleaned, and then reattached. No welding, because the EPA allows no welding on fire escapes now that have lead. And this fire escape is older than 1978. See all these welds? We got to cut all these welds, and from underneath you're going to find out why, because all these clips are full of rust. So this was sort of a band-aid, but they never sealed it. So all the water getting back in, 100% of these treads need to be opened and then reattached with connection with fasteners, and then the connection clips all cleaned and rebolted back, no welding. So again, getting back, superstructure looks good. Again, we have to just rebolt every welded connection. Same thing here happening with all these treads. And again, these plates are rotting from the underneath, and we're going to be able to see as we get further down. I'll use that downstairs to show how that's happening. And as you can see, there's a lot of rust buildup. Stringer clips, they welded. So somebody came in here and welded everything. Every one of these treads got welded. And that's not able for us to load test it at this time because they left the rust behind. Water's getting into these cracks and rusting these down below. It's a much cleaner shot of bolts. These are over 25 years old, so you change the bolts out, and any welded connection you rebolt it, you don't have a load test issue. So that's the option. Spot repair this fire escape and then load test. Or you can fully refurbish this fire escape at this time and there is no load test. So look at all that rust, and you're going to be able to see down below worse scenarios. But see all that rust building? But down below I'm going to be able to show you much more. Let's go down here. We're going to have to make sure we deal with all the cement issues in the walls. It's got to be cleaned, seated, and then we need to seal those up. See? Spalling, cracking of the cement. And you see what water does to the bottom of these if you don't seal these up. All right, and if you go up, all those treads all have rust in them. So you got to clean every single one of those out, both sides. And then you got to rebolt it, no welding back. So again, what you have here, this is part one of the examination, and as we go down, you're going to see even more rust because it's more visible. So, Fire Escape Engineers inspect the summary video. Part one, this is on Euclid in Cleveland, Ohio, 866-649-0333. And this is Inspector Cisco Meneses. Summary video, part two. We're here continuing down with this fire escape examination here on Euclid in Cleveland, Ohio. As you can see, a lot of scraping and painting, but because it's older than 78, it's presumed to have lead, so it's got to be an EPA renovator licensed person to touch this part. But we have to get all these diamond plates to be lifted and cleaned because they're doing that. See, look at all that rust jacking that's happening on all the floors. Every single floor has rust jacking, so you got to lift all the floors. Then you got all these treads that have been welded as a temporary repair. They got to be all cut the welds, remove the diamond plate, which can be reused, refasten them back with fasteners, and then all the clips need to be cleansed. And I'll show you that down below. Every one of these pipes that are welded, you need to pop a bolt through it to avoid the load test. Change the bolts there, and otherwise you can keep good bolts, but we're going to end up in a load test. So remember that. Any spot repair that leaves behind any original hardware, you must conclude in a load test. You refurbish the entire fire escape at this time, you're providing them other evidence of strength. The authority having jurisdiction shall accept by load test or other evidence of strength. So at this time, if you change all the fasteners, you provide them other evidence of strength. Otherwise, you can spot repair this fire escape and then load test it, and then 5 years from now, you must repeat the load test, okay? So every welded connection is gonna get a bolt. Here's the biggest problem. Look at all this rust. Look at all these clips with all the rust. Look at this clip. Look at this clip. Look at all that rust. Okay, so this is here. Look at how much rust is there. So you got to lift all the diamond plate and then refasten it back after you've cleansed all the rust. Then you got to seal all the joints so that no water gets back in there. See this bolted connection and a welded connection? As soon as we put bolts in that welded connection, there's no need to x-ray or load test that weld. Change these bolts, there's no need to load test it because you put new fasteners. And the reason being, look at that bolt, that nut. Okay, cement connections, anything that's a footing, we got to seal it so that no water's getting in there. Okay, and there's three structures on this building. This is structure number one, that's going to be structure number two, and there's one about the same size as this on the other side of this building that we're going to be looking at. So this is structure number one. All cement pads should be sealed so that water doesn't absorb and basically transfer onto the steel. Okay, so it's a big monster. Diamond plate stairs, diamond plate steel platforms. Well, you can it's about a 50% failure rate on the structural, only about a 75% failure rate, if not 100% on the treads. Cement wise, you're probably looking at about 25% failure rate on this. Any questions? Fire Escape Engineers. Inspect the summary video. This is Cisco Meneses, 866-649-0333.